Have you ever listened to someone speak and thought, wow, they are so authentic and grounded. I would love to learn more about their story. That was my experience meeting Dr. Jessie and Omar. We had such an amazing conversation that this podcast episode is actually 2 parts. Today we'll do part 1, and we're starting where most people rush past, the early chapters, the childhood patterns, the coping, the roles you take on, the way you learn to survive. Because when you understand what shaped you, you stop blaming yourself for patterns that were trained into you. This is the Your Next Success podcast, and I'm your host, Dr. Carolyn Sagal. I am a life-first career coach and strategist on a mission to normalize questioning your career, because I believe each of us is made on purpose for a purpose only we can fulfill. The longer we live out of alignment with who we are, what we do best, and why we are here, the more we miss out, and the more the world misses out on what only we can give. The Your Next Success podcast is where we explore how to build a career that truly fuels your life. We talk about self-discovery, smart job search strategies, professional growth, and you will hear stories from people who have navigated big career transitions themselves, so you can create a life-first career and become your own version of authentic success. My guests today are Dr. Jessie and Omar, founders of A Soul's Quest. They co-host the ASQ podcast and guide people through defining transitions with psychospiritual insight, practical tools, and grounded conversation. My conversations with Dr. Jessie and Omar touch on the place where you can look fine on the outside and still feel that quiet questioning inside you, where you have titles, degrees, competence, and effort, and your body still whispers, something is off. Where you try to power through and life keeps redirecting you until you finally stop arguing with what's true. You'll hear a love story here, and it's also a leadership story, a story about belonging, a story about pain that turns into purpose, a story about learning to give with wisdom, speak truth with integrity, and build a life that is authentic from the inside out. Today's part 1 of a 2-part conversation, and in this first episode, we go back, before the degrees, before the titles, before the now, and we talk about the early experiences that shaped how they learned to connect, protect, push, and persevere. And as you listen, you might notice yourself reflecting too on what trained you, what you carried, and what you've been trying to prove. So if you've been at a turning point and you're asking, why do I keep doing this? Or why does this feel so hard even when I'm doing everything right? You're in the right place. Welcome, Dr. Jessie and Omar. I am so excited to have you here on Your Next Success today.
We are super equally, maybe more excited than you are. We're super excited.
I agree. I was telling you, I love your energy. I love the excitement. We've met before, and I would love to have the conversation right now. So yes, thank you for having us.
And so, yeah, I think we have aligned, maybe parallel interests in how we help people.
Mhm.
And so this is a great opportunity. I was on your guys' podcast. That'll be coming out in a couple months. And now it's awesome to have you here on mine so we can kind of tell each other stories and help as many people as possible.
That's
Absolutely.
right.
All right. Well, as you guys know, one of the things that I love studying is careers, career transitions, those sorts of things. And so I listened to a lot of your individual stories from your podcast. I highly encourage people to go back way, way back on the ASQ podcast to listen to the beginning ones for
My
even
goodness.
more of the story.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
It was good. It was great.
Thank you.
It was great for me to see a little bit because now you guys are, how many episodes do you have out in this moment? 100 something.
132.
Yeah.
132. Yes.
Yeah. So it was refreshing for me to go back to your beginning and be like, they made it. And they
We're
still
still
sounded
going.
really good. Gives
What
me
did we
some hope.
sound like on our first episode?
Oh,
my goodness.
it's been a learning experience, which is
Yeah.
we'll get into all that. Yes, because it's part of the journey.
Yeah. So I'd love to kind of dial it back to both of your childhoods. Can you, like, whoever wants to go first,
Tell me a little bit about growing up, and specifically what kind of work did you see your family members doing? What did you think in that moment, as far as did you have visions or dreams of what you thought you might do when you became an adult? Those types of things.
So I was born in San Juan, Puerto Rico. And I know I'm saying it like I should be saying Puerto Rico, right? So I was born in San Juan, Puerto Rico, and my mother is Dominican and my father is a New Yorican. So he ended up back in Puerto Rico and ended up joining the military. So he wasn't around for the first couple of years of my life. So it was just me and mom. And growing up, we ended up moving to the States. And first thing my mom said is, I want to learn how to speak English. We're speaking English in our house, period. So sadly, that sort of forced us to kind of lose our language and not, or my brother never had the language. I did, but we just didn't hold on to that. We helped my mom learn English. And then we ended up moving to Rockford, Illinois, which is right outside of Chicago. Some people know it and some people don't. So I always have to refer to Chicago. And my family structure was very sort of normal. Like I reflect on it now and I think, wow, I really didn't have a lot of, relationships with my father. And that's something that has been punctuated now throughout my adult life, right? But we had a really great relationship with my mom. She was like the mom on the block. Like everybody loved my mom, right? She had a 3-wheeler. She'd throw all this stuff in there. We'd go do campfires and roast marshmallows and hot dogs. And we just had a really good upbringing in terms of that. But one thing that I did notice is that, one, I wasn't very close to my father. He was not that dad that kind of went out to the park with us and did things like that with us. And he was kind of hard on me because I don't know how my brother looks at this whole thing, although we have similar feelings about it. But we didn't really get a lot of optimistic interactions. It was very pessimistic. We don't have any money for that. We're broke. There was common language that we picked up that I brought with me into adulthood, right? I realized that I did a lot of striving to make him happy, like to people please and get that affection that I was looking for. And I just never got it. And every time I would do something that I thought was good, bring home good grades and do this and do that, and I'm evolving and transforming, I'm growing into this young little lady, it was just very negative. His interaction with me was very negative. It wasn't like, I love you, you're amazing, you're beautiful. It wasn't any of that ever. I mean, I can count on one hand how many times he said he loves me.
Did you ever see his parents? Like, I wonder if that's just like my husband's family and my family grew up differently in terms of the affection.
Yeah.
Or like on one side, it was hugs and kisses and I do love you. And even if you were pissed at somebody, it was, I love you, right? I love you. And then in my husband's family, it's like, don't say thank you, we're family. It's just like understood, and it's not as touch, and it's a different kind of love than I had. So my husband either just stays with me because I'm amazing, or he does love me, but I think he does love me.
Both.
But I wonder, is that how your dad was, or that's just part of the family dynamic? Maybe his parents or grandparents or the things that he had seen, maybe he didn't have that. If you see it, you can be it kind of thing.
Right.
Did he have?
I think for me, for almost all of my life, I'll be 53 next month. And almost all of my life, I was in my adulthood. Let me say my adulthood. I was always very frustrated with my father because I was always blaming them. You know what I mean? Blaming them for how could they treat me this way? What do I have to do to get attention? I've done so many things, even as an adult, earned my PhD. And not once has he said, congratulations, nothing from him at all. I think now, as I've spoken to multiple people, I can look back and think this is what he had. And this is what he did because this is what he had. And this is what he learned, right? I was very close to my grandmother at one point, his mom. She recently passed away. And but my grandfather passed away when he was 16. So I don't know about him, and I don't know what it was like growing up in that house. I assume that there was probably not a lot of emotions that were talked about. But again, those are all assumptions because that's how it was in my house. We weren't allowed to grieve. We weren't allowed to have emotions. We got hit with the belt. At that time, that was a normal thing to do, you know? We were told to just look cute, don't talk, that kind of thing.
Be seen and not heard. Yep.
Exactly. Yep. I do think that a lot of it has to do with that. I can look back now and I can see that that's the case, that he didn't get a lot of affection. And I think there was almost an unhealthy sort of relationship between him and his mom. He was very, very attached to my grandmother. You know what I mean?
With his dad passing away, then he had to step into a role,
Yep.
you know, just being a,
Yeah, exactly.
And did your mom ever work? Like, she seems like an amazing mom, very welcoming to whoever wanted to come by, and always made sure you guys were doing amazing things.
Yeah. She did work. I think my mom, again, when you reflect on this, and especially since I'm evolving and growing and learning things and trying to capture things that I feel and trying to kind of dismantle these things to understand why I feel this way, why is this happening, why does this feel this way, and doing what we say on ASQ, asking what, right? What is the experience that I can learn from this moment or from those moments? My mom was a work person. She was very involved, like I said, in everything that we did. She worked. She tried to stay close to us. So she would get jobs like at the school. So she worked in the cafeteria. So both of my parents were very blue collar workers. They were never people that sort of were like encouraging us with education, encouraging us with, it doesn't matter if you get a C on this test, keep looking forward. You're doing great. We didn't get that sort of like support. It just wasn't like that. It wasn't something that they put on our purview. Like, you can be this or you can be that. You could do these things. It was very much a very curiosity driven home. Like, we weren't encouraged to like be curious. Try. In fact, we were told not to. You know what I mean?
And even in the military, what kind of job did your dad have?
In the military, he was like, I guess, a diesel mechanic is what they call it. Yeah. So, and even when he exited the military and went to work, he worked at a place, the whole industrial thing was going on in Rocky, Illinois, lots of industrial stuff. My mom worked at a place where they built those plastic, you build these toys or airplanes and stuff. And you paint it with the paint.
Oh, yeah. Like the little model airplane models. Yes.
That she used to work at a place like that, and she bottled the paint, if I'm not mistaken, because we used to get these little kits all the time at home, but we were never allowed to put them together. Our curiosity was so stifled when we were children. It was almost like, go outside and play. Don't be messing up the house. So we didn't have a lot of that oomph.
And did you ever consider, when I'm an adult, I want to...
I used to think I wanted to be a doctor. Then I said I wanted to do a lawyer.
You are a doctor. Kids tell me I'm a doctor without any patience.
Right. Exactly.
It goes all ways.
Truth. Facts. Yeah. But again, I remember there was this conversation that I had with my dad, just to give you a kind of an overview. And I had told my dad, I want to be a doctor. I told him, I was in the backseat with my brother, and I said, I think I want to be a doctor. I was telling my brother that. And my dad said, not with those kind of grades, you're not going to be a doctor. So it was just very, like, even to say things was very just...
There's a tension there.
And I didn't realize it until now, because now I'm trying to be more curious. I'm trying to get more involved and trying to get my hands into all the things that we're doing with ASQ. And it's like, sometimes I'm like, I feel like overwhelmed and like lost, and I'm like, what can I capitalize on? What can I focus on that I am good at? You know what I mean? And then that leaves all the IT to him. And I feel terrible because I want to be helpful.
So I used to feel bad or terrible when I was like, some things that I'm thinking like, oh, come on, I should be great at this. And I'm not, right? Or like numbers. I freaking got a PhD in science, for God's sake. So like numbers I can do.
Right.
But let's say like remembering numbers, like my phone number, like anybody else's phone number, right?
Yes.
What time were my children born? Like, I just don't know. And so those kind of moms that were like, oh, it was 6:52 on a Wednesday morning. And I'm like, you know what? My kid was freaking chopped out of me emergency. So he's healthy. I don't know what the frick time that was. Or my phone number, I used to have a sticky note. So if I was leaving a message, I would do that. And I used to feel so bad. What a, imposter or horrible person I am, or I think I'm smart and blah, blah, blah. And then when I took one of the assessments that I now offer, the Highlands Ability Battery, and I saw we are all given gifts and talents. We know that, right? Theoretically, like by God, by universe, by whatever you want to say, by somebody, genetics, who cares? we all have certain stuff poured into us on purpose, for a purpose only we can do, and for a reason.
Right.
And it's okay. I didn't
Mm.
get that one poured into me in that respect, but I had
Yeah.
others. And so that sets me up for other things, like maybe dealing with people a little bit more than dealing with accounting and bills
Yeah.
and invoices. So I think leveraging, especially you guys as a partnership, so that you can, like, when you're doing things that's aligned with how you're wired, it feels
Mhm.
energizing, it feels exciting, it feels good. And
Yeah.
just because you can do something doesn't mean you have to.
Yeah.
And so by default, it's just going to fall on Omar. And I don't know if
Exactly.
you got that poured into you or if you're just taking it for the team. But how about
Totally.
when you were growing up? Like, tell me a little bit about that experience for
Yeah.
you.
It's interesting because I'm listening to Jessie talk about her childhood and stuff. And over the weekend, I'm going to be doing a presentation on ACEs. And ACEs are all these adverse experiences that we have as children, and how did they manifest as we go through our life, right? So, uh, growing up, my mom has always been an entrepreneur. She was a hairdresser all her life, and only worked for someone maybe once or twice in her life. So all I seen from her was always that independence, that idea of doing her own thing. But she'd always encouraged me to go to school and get an education. And she always used to tell me, Omar, I don't have money to give you. All I could give you is an education, which is a bad advice, number one, because most people don't understand what the word education means and what the concept of education really is. So when I was growing up, my aunt she was a nurse. She grew up with us. A lot of my immediate family were professionals. Now they were in Dominican Republic, which is an island in the Caribbean, but nonetheless, they were professionals, nurses, entrepreneurs, people that owned their own business. And my grandfather had a lot of land, so not wealthy in terms of money, but wealthy in terms of they always worked and they always did their own thing. They never worked for anyone. Moving from Dominican Republic to New York City to South Bronx when I was 10, I was fortunate enough to be a Boy Scout leader, right? So I became a Boy Scout. A couple of years later, I became the junior assistant scoutmaster. And I was introduced to two people, Ken Mullen and Betty Medina. And this is when a lot of things changed for me, because I want you to think about a 13, 14, 15-year-olds having to plan a Boy Scout entire year, including the summer, downtown Manhattan at the AT&T building boards room. So my experience was at that early age was planning programs from
Nice.
beginning to end, setting a goal, understanding what could go wrong, understanding all these different nuances about strategic planning, about how to think, how to set goals, and then being able to teach that at that early age. So I was exposed to that as a very young age, and being 14, 15, 17 and being in charge of like 120 kids, and you're responsible for manifesting. And not just me, it was just a couple of us that were the leaders, and Ken put us in charge. There was a certain level of confidence and cockiness that a 17, 16 years old don't understand, right? So here I am, and Ken encouraged it. I was talking to my friend Danny. We were talking about this one day. We were going on a field trip. So Danny and I planned a field trip. Ken had cancer at the time, so he was getting treatment. So he asked a parent, an adult, to go with us because they needed an adult.
Right.
And then the parents started getting a little mouthy with Danny and I. And you just called Ken. Ken got on the phone, and Ken told them, the only reason why you're there is because you're over 18 and they're not. So you better listen to what they tell you. Right. So that was a pivotal point in my life because he gave me the confidence. But also what I saw with a lot of my friends, and Ken was a military man. He was a former New York City police officer. So that idea, the paramilitary concept was in there. But I had a lot of aces up to that point, and in retrospect, looking at it. So I went to school to go do criminal justice, and I wanted to go into the FBI. But there was something inside of me that that wasn't it.
How did you get that idea then? Was it because of your mentor being military, being a police officer, and you're kind of thinking in that realm? Or did you know anybody that had done it, or just it looks so cool on TV? Where did that idea even come from?
I love Point Break, the original with Keanu Reeves and Patrick Swayze. So I wanted to be Keanu Reeves from Point Break. How about that?
Okay, a lot of people. He was so cool in that.
Right.
Like, he was such a
So
cool guy. You know.
Right.
Vaya con Dios.
Vaya con Dios, right? You see
Yeah.
movies like Seven, those investigative movies, and you see all that. But it was interesting though, because I never wanted to go into the military. I remember Ken gave me this book to read, and it was called Outbreak. And they made it into a movie with Dustin Hoffman. And this idea of rebelling against the system, right? You know, you have your marching orders, but you know that if you do this, this is wrong, right?
Yeah.
And you have to do whatever it takes to stop it in an environment in which you shouldn't do that. So Ken was always putting all these devil advocate things, right? Like, what are you going to do? In addition to that, we used to go to Catholic church on Sundays, but afterwards we will have these in-depth conversations about morality and what does it mean to do this and things like that. So that was already part of my makeup. But when I got into college, and I did great throughout high school, I always was top of the class. I graduated number 5 on my class.
And your class must have been big then, being in New
It
York
was,
City.
I think it was like 400, 500 in our class.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And we have certain gifts. I couldn't study. I'm always fidgeting and moving. So I was always good at remembering things. I love math and history and literature. Like, I love that part. But I was never really good at focusing. So when I got to college, I struggled a lot, particularly because it was that time. I was in that gap in which you went from doing everything manual to starting using scientific calculators. So I will do all my work manually, but I wouldn't get good grades because you needed to use a scientific calculator. But I'm like, I got the answers right. It's like, no, but you didn't follow the process. So there goes that rebelling part
Yeah.
in me, which I get from my mom and I get from Ken and I get from Betty. So in my 20s, I struggled quite a bit just to find my place. I went into a spiritual journey, so to speak. I was very depressed once I figured out criminal justice is not for me, but I have a semester left in college. What am I going to do? I'm going to just drop out? No, I finished it. You feel like an empty accomplishment.
Yeah. Okay, catch Jessie back up to this
Uh-huh.
timeline, right? Because
Yeah.
last we left, you were in Rockford, Illinois, elementary. But tell me about high school then, like because I think you moved, and yeah,
We did. So when I was 14, my aunt was, unbeknownst to me and my brother, my aunt, who was everything to me, everything in the world. Like, I loved her so much. She was that person that really made me feel good. Like, she is the one that said, "Your afro is so cute." And I was just like, oh my God, mortified because I had short curly hair and it was like afro. I didn't know how to take care of it. I was chunky and she was like, "You're beautiful. Let me do your eyebrows." And she just did all the things. I felt so connected to her. So when we moved to Florida, I was excited about it. I didn't know she was dying. And the first thing that we did was we got off the highway and we went straight to the hospital. Me and my brother were like, "What are we doing here?" And we go upstairs to the ICU, and we have to put on gowns from top to bottom. Everything has to be covered, hands, feet, everything. And it turns out she's in the hospital dying. And it was a shock. And so this is the way my parents.
yeah. And so your parents, it sounds like there was not a lot talked about,
No.
but kind of like a need to know basis, and there was a lot
Yeah.
of things that they decided you just didn't need to know.
And
Yeah.
so then that's where I found out that my aunt was transgendered, which blew my mind because again, not talked about. So I don't have any idea what this is. And I was devastated by her death. And I'll never forget me and my mom and dad in the front. My dad's driving, me and my brother in the backseat. And I am crying, like boohoo crying, like baby crying. It was really bad.
Yeah.
I was just devastated. And I'll never forget us driving out and my mom, this reaction from her, she turned around and she slapped me and she said, "Stop crying." And it was like, we weren't allowed to like
Yeah.
process even our feelings or talk about it, you know? And so that stuck with me for a long time. And of course, being, not having a lot of encouragement, like there's such a difference as to how Omar grew up, which it's a beautiful thing. He had all this encouragement and trust, and we didn't have a lot of that. So it was very much me trying to fit in and belong anywhere I could belong. And so that's how it was all through high school. I didn't try new things for fear of failure. The things that I did try,
where did the running come in?
So
Because I
I
heard something about you being like becoming this
was a runner.
amazing, like, come on, cross country. Like, I
I
don't know.
did.
For me, if I was running, then I would start to be sweating and I would start to feel uncomfortable. Like, I loved jumping in water
Yeah.
because that was different. But the other, like, I didn't realize till way later that was connecting to trauma responses of not wanting that feeling. And that
Yeah.
feeling also came with running or exerting without water. But like, how did you just like,
So I wanted to get involved in something. And a friend of mine, her name was Jania, she was like, I'm doing this thing. Why don't you come? Why don't you join? And it was like an after school thing. And that's how I got. So it wasn't even on the books. We didn't get like a grade for it. It was just something that we got involved in. It was like an after school program. So
yeah,
I started. I did not want to fail because I was like, I'm going to be good at something. I'm going to do this. And I started to really like it. I started to like this. Oh my God, I just ran a mile. Oh wow, I just ran 2 miles, and then increasing my miles and doing this whole, like, it was a running club, an after school
yeah,
running club. And the coaches were really cool. It was different and they were really hard on us. But I found myself doing what I was doing because I was liking this. You're doing great. Keep it up, Jess. Keep going,
yeah,
keep going. And I wasn't getting that in any other area of my life
gotcha.
except for from these coaches. There was 2 coaches, a man and a female. And I was just like really just wanting to belong to something. And so I took this up as a sort of to like just bide that moment or to fill that void. You know what I mean? And it was great. It was fun. And I continued to do it as I became an adult. I love to run. I ran whole marathons, not on the books
But
or anything, but still did it with this
yeah.
group. And it was great. It was really a really good, exciting time for me. But I didn't have my parents come to any of these things that we put on, any of these events. They didn't come and see me do these things. It was just kind of like, Jesse's
That
just,
was your thing. But you found this like freedom and encouragement and release and maybe community,
yeah, I
other
did.
people
Mhm.
striving.
Yep. It wasn't a conversation ever, though. It wasn't like that. It was that exercise moment. I don't know if I'm explaining it very well, but just that moment of I'm achieving something in that moment, but I'm not talking about what I'm feeling, and we're not having these discussions. So it's kind of
But
temporary.
still, there's so many things that have to move through us. And so without even consciously knowing it, you're giving space for maybe some of that process. And then when you started working, what kind of jobs did you take? What did you do? Yeah, I'm so curious about how this went out because I think after graduating high school, what were you doing? Let's talk about that a little bit.
So for me and my family, it was, again, school wasn't encouraged. I wasn't encouraged to go look at different colleges. I wasn't encouraged to like whatever. It was, you need to get a job because when you're 18, we're done taking care of you and you need to figure things out. And I'm making it sound really bad, but it's kind of like that's really what happened. I wasn't, it was almost like me and my brother were burdens. And it was, okay, we've done our time. When you're 18, let's go. So like chop, chop, time to go. So for us, it was, oh, well, damn, we need to get jobs. So I got my first job at Burger King when I was 14, when I first moved down, because my mom and dad were like, we're not buying clothes for you anymore. You need to buy your own clothes. And then as I went through high school, I worked at different places, like something that was, it was called Builder Square. I don't even think it exists anymore. As a cashier, I worked at like Winn-Dixie. I did things like that. And then in my high school, and right after high school, I got a job as a hostess or a waitress at the Breakers Hotel here in Palm Beach. And I was making crazy money, but my desire to belong and my desire to be needed and my desire to be looked at as somebody who was accomplishing everything, I spent all my money on my friends and on stupid stuff, like crazy, ridiculous. I wasn't even thinking about finances, and we didn't get really taught about finances and how important it is to save and budget and look at what you're doing and how, you know what I mean? It wasn't that type of whatever. And I didn't have mentors and people that said, hey, Jess, calm down. You are spending all your money. Relax. Look at this or do that. So it was me just kind of trying to figure things out on my own, as I went along. So I worked at the Breakers for about a year, and then I got totally like rebellious, just going to the club, doing this, doing that. I was just, when I look at that point in my life, I think I was just in a fog, just trying to just let loose and just have fun, go through, friends and having some boyfriends and whatnot and so on and so forth. And just not even, it's just like a fog. Seriously, when I
Yeah.
think about it, you know what I mean? Because you're bringing up a lot of memories for me. But when I look back at it, I mean, I was like sneaking out my window to go out to the clubs. My parents, one day, my dad found out that I snuck out and I came back and I can see it's completely dark in the front of the house. And all I see, because he was a smoker, is this orange dot. And it was bright for a while. And I knew he was upset. And he told me, "You have to move out. That's
Oh,
enough.
wow.
You're home
Yeah.
late. It's enough. This is a third time." And so it's almost like I pushed that to happen
Yeah.
because I knew it was going to happen. I was going to get thrown out if I didn't respect the rules. But I can't even put a finger on what was going through me. I was just in a fog. I was just so desperate to belong and to be needed and to be like somebody acknowledge that I'm doing something right. So I was like, if I'm not doing anything right and I can't get acknowledged, I'll just do everything wrong. He acknowledged me then. Does that make sense? And
Yeah,
I
it
can't,
does. It
I'm not a
does.
therapist, so I'm not really sure how to kind of determine what that was, but it was a lot of really a lot of people pleasing. So then I got pregnant. And I wasn't living at home. I was kind of jumping from couch to couch. I did have my own apartment at one point with a friend that we shared, and it was crazy, just doing all kinds of crazy stuff all the time. And I ended up getting pregnant. And then I ended up marrying this guy 6 months later because that was the right thing to do. You can't have a child out of wedlock. Like, how dare you do this to our family? Um, and it was a very loveless marriage. I didn't want to get married. I was like, we can just have this kid together and not be married, can't we? And they didn't want that. So we ended up getting married. And yeah, what else? What am I missing?
Okay, so now you have a child.
You
How did
asked me
that
what kind of
affect your outlook on it? When the baby came, did you have to work? Did you choose to work? What happened
I
there?
did.
Yeah.
I did have to work. I went to school to be a medical assistant while I was pregnant. And the
Oh,
program
wow.
that I was in was like an 8-month program. And
How'd
so
you pick that? Was it
I
maybe seeing stuff with your aunt?
I think it was just me thinking this could be a way into the medical field
And you had
later.
thought about being a doctor?
And I was like, I don't know. Again, just my mom and dad were like, you need to do something. Something's got to give. And I needed to get a job. And this person that I was with, wasn't making a lot of money. We were both just getting started.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I became a medical assistant and put my son in daycare. And that's what I did for years. I was a medical assistant. For a couple of years, I was a medical assistant until one day I just wasn't. And I ended up staying home at that point, I had 3 kids. I had twins. And it was way expensive to put 3 kids in
Yeah.
daycare. So I had no choice but to stay home. And it was I was trying to get out of this marriage at the time. And then I found out I was pregnant. And I'm like, thinking I'm having 1 additional child, then I'm having 2. And I'm like, I was going to say the F word. I'm so screwed.
Go for it.
Okay. I
Yeah.
was going to say I'm so fucked.
Yeah.
I'm stuck here in this relationship that I don't want to be in. My parents really liked this person. And it was never this, it was like I was doing something right because I got married to this person who was doing things right. He was working and making money at that point. And here I am just kind of like stay at home mom, pregnant.
Had you ever did you have like cousins or something that had little babies? Was your child the first little baby that you
Pretty
had
much.
to?
Yeah,
Yeah.
pretty much.
A-
Didn't know how
And then
difficult it would be. We didn't have that program where they give you the fake baby and the baby cries all night. Because if I had that, I probably would never have I would never have done this. But I didn't go through that. We didn't have that experience in school. And, I was just very careless and just doing things, just going with the flow of things. It was very just like I was having this out of body experience. I'm not even present. I'm in a fog for so many years of my life up until literally when I met Omar, when things started to kind of open up for me a little bit. And even then it was very, I need to get a job. I need to get an education. I got to do the right things. I got to pay bills. I got to do, then I'm
yeah.
more
How
alive.
did how did you transition from like, yeah, all of a sudden now you're full-time caregiver for 3 children and you didn't have any models of that prior to?
Yeah. It
How
was a
did
lot.
how were you not? Yeah, yeah.
When I reflect on that time, Carolyn, really, that was probably the most unhappy part of my life. I'm getting emotional. It's probably the most unhappy part of my life. You have
I think you had
kids.
PPD also, because I feel like I had PPD, but just going from the growing up, if you showed although we said I love you all the time, right? But and you still couldn't necessarily feel certain feelings were allowed to be shown and others were not. And so I didn't anybody that had mental struggles, they were crazy people, right?
Yeah.
And so I
Yeah.
sure as heck didn't want to be crazy people. So I wanted to be known for smart, but not for crazy. And I didn't even think, and then I didn't want to get anything, do something wrong or whatever. But yet I was not
I was going
myself.
through it. I was going through it. I literally can reflect on those days, and I have curly hair naturally. And usually I'll get it to a point where I'm like, okay, it's time to cut my hair and take care of myself. I had hair past my butt. And that to me was kind of gross. No judgment to anybody who has their hair past their butt, just me. That was gross. I hadn't taken showers in days, like me at all.
Where was the time though? If you're the sole person and now there's and like, cause somebody always needs something.
Yeah.
Right. Or is crying like, and I don't know, like with the
I don't
first
know how to
kid, I
do
didn't
it.
want him to cry at all. Then with the second kid, I'm like, I'm gonna just strap you in this bouncy chair and you can just have at it while I brush my teeth, but still, no, but,
Same.
like before that, there were days that you like, it doesn't make sense until you're in it. Because without having kids, I'm thinking like, are you kidding me? What do you mean you don't have time to brush your teeth? And then I'm like, because
Guilty.
nobody tells you that when you're nursing a baby and it's like, oh, well, they eat every, 1 to 3 hours, and that's start to start.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you got a grazer, you are not having a time for yourself.
Imagine what your life would be like if your career aligned with who you are, what you do best, and actually fueled the life you want. At Next Success, we support all ages and stages through career transitions, from students exploring majors or careers to job seekers actively searching or reimagining their next move to professionals committed to self-awareness and leadership growth. Stay connected and explore what's possible at nextsuccesscareers.com and follow Next Success Method on LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook.
And so then you have 3 kids. Each of them are different in their own ways. With the twins, when one would poop, the next one would poop. When one would puke, it was like when one was sick, and it was like constant chronic sick all the time.
Oh yeah.
They had their
Yeah.
tonsils removed. They had their adenoids done. They had
Ugh.
all kinds of shit done. It was crazy. And I was doing this by myself. You know what I mean? I was like a single married woman, literally. And it was hard. And I don't think that, sometimes my son will say, oh, you just don't understand how he's got 1 kid.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
hard for me.
And she doesn't cry.
Bad.
She doesn't cry either.
She does. She's a fun baby. My granddaughter's a fun baby. And but I know it's hard. But dude, multiply that times 3 and then talk to me.
And being young and being super young, where you're in so many cases just trying to grow up yourself.
Yeah. Oh,
and now you've you're responsible for other lives in the world.
By the time I was 23, I had 3 kids.
Wow.
And I went to the gynecologist when I was going to have the twins. I was like, please, can you fix it down there? I can't, because I wasn't supposed to even get pregnant with the twins. I had a cold and I was on the pill and I was on antibiotics, and somehow or another it didn't get to me that you need to use protection because you could get pregnant. You're on cold medicine. Anyway, I don't regret having the kids, but it was a very tough time in my life. And a lot of those days just blended together. I remember when the kids would get on the bus, I would go right back to my bed and sleep until right before they had to come home because I wasn't sleeping. Mountains of laundry constantly, sick kids constantly. It was just like, and the only thing that I had was a phone to talk to people. And I didn't even really have that many friends because they're like, oh, she's got 3 kids. That's a lot.
Right. Because if you're one of the first ones in your friend group to have kids, all of a sudden you become untouchable.
That's it.
Something,
totally untouchable. And so I didn't have a really big support system. And even when I left my ex-husband, everybody that I knew turned their back on me because somehow he painted this picture that I was the bad guy and never took accountability for his stuff, and what about what you did? None of that mattered. And so I literally just
And
did.
you weren't the type to be telling
No, I
anything
wasn't.
of your
No.
thoughts and feelings. Just
Even my parents felt that I was
Yeah.
wrong for leaving him. I mean, even my parents chose him over me and didn't support what I was going through. It was just a really dark time for me because who do you talk to? And then how do you share what's happening when you can't even put the words together to figure this out because it's not normalized. It's not something that people talk about. You don't have any friends. You have no family support. It's like I was alone.
And still, you had this inner inside you, realizing the pain of staying the same
Yeah.
is worse than the pain of leaving.
Absolutely.
And so chose yourself, your own well-being, that of your kids. And then when you went back to work, because sometime you would have had to go, then what did you choose to do? Were you still doing medical assisting related things or what happened there?
So what happened was I did this exodus and I knew, and I was making a conscious decision at the time. I knew that if I leave, I cannot physically support financially. I can't support my children financially. I also knew that if I stayed, I would rather just be dead. I wasn't a good mom. I wasn't good to myself. It was a really tough decision to make. So I left and I left the kids with him because I needed to just leave everything and everybody. So I did literally an exodus. I left the state. I went to another state. And in that year, I discovered a lot of things about myself. I discovered that, I'm not so bad. I discovered that I do like things, even though I don't know what they are. I discovered a lot of things. Most of all, I discovered that I could take care of myself rather than depend on somebody to take care of me. So I learned how to do that to gain my independence and not be relying on other people to take care of me. And that was the key thing. So when I came back, made the mistake of going back to him because I really wanted to be with my kids.
Yeah.
But leaving him the second time was much easier than the first time because I was like, I have a car, I have a job, but the job that I had was not in medical assisting. I think it was like I was doing like cashiering at like Walmart or something. And then I got a job at the Boys and Girls Club. And at this point I had separated from him. And that's where Omar comes into the picture. I met him at the
Okay, I was wondering how it lined. So, but when you left, and that must have been such a difficult decision that that's your only option.
So hard.
But if you had stayed, I might not be talking to you today. So I'm glad you did what you had to do because you had to break free for a moment to take care of your own self. You had to be able to have the time to put on your own oxygen mask before trying to help others. How old were your kids at that time?
So Jacob was, I'm going to say he was probably 4 or 5, and the twins were about 3. They're 2 years apart. So yeah, they were pretty young. They were out of diapers and whatnot. And he had a lot of support. So he had a lot of people that came in, and I'm grateful that those people were there when I was not there. But I literally needed to, like you said, I needed to put my own oxygen mask on. I was like dying. I was suffocating in that life that I was living. But when I came back, again, I had this freedom, this realized freedom of I can take care of myself. I can do this. I can balance my own checkbook. I can do these things where I wasn't doing any of that before. Like he took care of everything. Was there
any formal support that you got? Like, had you broken into like, okay, there's people called therapists that could be great, helpful, or you just were on your own sorting it out?
I was on my own at that point, but when I did come back, I did get therapy.
How did you know that was a thing though?
I don't even know, to be honest with you. I have no idea, but I do recall going to therapy. But I got to tell you, sometimes there are, no offense again, but I'm going to say it. Some therapists suck.
They do. They certainly
therapists
do, right?
Suck.
And I felt so bad about that. And some people suck too, right? But then it gives a bad rap for others. And then if you have somebody in such need of help and then you don't get, and so it's so trial and error sometimes.
Yes.
It's like, who has time for that? It's already so hard to be vulnerable. And then you like try to trust somebody and you realize that they suck. Try to do it all over again,
It's almost like I was going to this therapist and I'm going there for daddy issues because this is all stemming from this missing piece in my life of not being encouraged, not being loved, not being told you're beautiful. And so much of this ties into that when I think about it, like not getting the encouragement that I needed to figure out finances, to look for a career that would be good for you. We did that for my kids. Like I encouraged them, hey, you have choices. You can do this, this, and this. There's choices and consequences. Like this whole methodology that we gave them. And they landed in a space where they're completely independent right now. Completely. They're in service, public service. They're firefighters and police officers, but they made decisions based on the encouragement. And when they failed a test, it's okay, guys. Just pick it up, study harder. I didn't get that. So I was giving what I didn't get, but now I'm realizing I'm overcompensating in this whole nurture area. I want to be accepted by my kids now. I got to do this because I'm scared to lose my kids because I was a bad mother. Like it's this whole vicious cycle that you go through until you start to sort things out and understand that you have to have a balance in these different areas, right? Something that we talk about in ASQ. But I'm not sure if I answered your question.
Thank you so much for sharing that beautiful part of your journey. At the time, I'm sure it was just freaking terrifying and exhausting. Seeing what you guys have built beyond that, it is beautiful from this viewpoint. For that one, it must have been terrifying. Okay, so Omar, let's catch this up because you think you're going to be an FBI agent, and then you realize, nah, it's not like the movies. Or tell us what happened there.
Well,
Not everybody was as cool as Keanu.
Nope.
Nope.
I remember I enjoy a lot of my criminal justice classes. They were very interesting, learning about organized crime, terrorism, and all this stuff. It was really cool. But I remember it was my senior year, first semester. We were doing a project, and then this FBI agent came in, and I was just like, no.
What was it? Let's
he
articulate that a little bit more. What was it about that?
He was just a prick. He was just like one of those guys that it was like, this is what law enforcement is. And again, it's like, I just make it a generalization, but just seeing what he stood for and the arrogance and the thing, it just wasn't me. Plus, most people don't understand that the FBI, it's not really, guns blazing type of stuff, right? A lot of the FBI, what they do is really accounting and investigating white collar crimes and a lot of that stuff, which is, I've learned that's not my skills. It's not one of my innate things.
You seem to kind of maybe love and need that people-centered environment.
Exactly.
The opportunity to be interacting face to face with people as much as you can.
So what happened at that age is that confusion steps in, because it's like, wait a minute. By that time, I was an assistant manager at the Gap. I went through their internship program.
Were you best dressed?
I was actually called Gap Boy in Orlando, so I was known as the Gap Boy. But I went through their internship program. By that time, I already had my own apartment. I set the goals because again, I was taught to set goals. During that time, it was a very, unlike Jessie, because again, what she went through, it's parallel because it brought us together. But at that time, that idea of who am I really came in, and I was fortunate enough that.
And how old were you at this moment?
19.
Yeah. See, there's normal times people start questioning their life and their career, and they happen at predictable stages, and they can kind of shift a little bit depending on if you bring somebody else into your world or maybe people come out of your body. If we can skew those, but one is around 18, another could be around 22 to 26. And so both of you though had these things, and you can have by choice or by force, but it is a natural time of questioning. And so here you are, and but you kind of paid attention a little bit, right? Sometimes people override it by what they should do, but yeah.
Well, and like I said, I was fortunate. I mean, like what you're mentioning is Eric Erickson's stages of development and the crisis that happens in between if you don't understand that, right? So, but again, I was fortunate because I was always challenged. If I don't know something, there's something out there or someone out there that knows it, right? So I remember, and I tell people, this is one of the stories that was formative in my life at that stage, right? My mother, right away when you're in our culture, whenever something's going on, it's like, oh, you got to go to a doctor, right? So she takes me to a neurologist. And I'm like, look, I don't want to take medications. I don't know. I know that I'm not crazy. I just don't know what I'm going to do with my life. I'm lost. I'm lost. I just that's what I know. I know that I'm lost. So he laughs at me. He goes into his desk, gets a prescription pad, and then he starts writing things down. And I'm rolling my eyes like, dude, I just told you. I
Right.
just don't know what to do next. So he writes these things down. He gives me the prescription and he says, take this. And he's like, I completely understand what you're saying, but here's 3 books. So the 3 books that he gave me on the pad on the prescription was number 1, Awaken the Giant Within by Tony Robbins, which
Yep.
is a good book, but I wasn't really crazy into it. I was like, okay, whatever. The second one was How to Win Friends and Influence Others. Again, it was okay. It's a great book, but that's not my thing. But the last book was the one book that really transformed my life. And it's called I'm Okay, You're Okay by Thomas A. Harris. And this idea of transactional analysis and the different personalities of the different things that you have, the adult, the parent, the child, and being able to understand that. But the one thing about that book at that age that really hit me was that idea of forgiving, and primarily forgiving your parents, right? Because like you mentioned earlier, it's like they only do what they know, and they only did what they knew. So at that point, I grew up without a father. So one of the first things that I did, well, actually, the first thing that I did was write a letter to my mother, because her and I, although I was doing all these different things, now I'm no longer her baby. I'm doing all this stuff. So I lived 2 lives, right? At home,
Yep.
I was just a child, but outside, I'm this person that is getting awards from the city and all that stuff. And it was that conflict. And then I had a girlfriend, though that was another conflict. And I wanted to do my thing, and that was another conflict. So I had to write that letter for her. Then I went to seek out my father and confront that situation. But then after that, after doing all that, it's like, okay, what am I going to do? So I said, well, I finished college. I got a degree. What do I know how to do? What am I good at? Well, you know how to work with young people. So I got a job at the Boys and Girls Club. And this is back in 2000 actually. But what ended up happening is that although I enjoy that, there were still those splintering questions as to like, who am I? Why am I here? What is my purpose? Like deep down inside. And I really didn't articulate it. And Jesse used to tell me that it's like, all you do is just read books. Because at that time, all I did was just take information and take information. And I went into quote unquote a spiritual type journey, so to speak, learning different ideologies, learning different modalities of spiritual things. I took classes in Miami for a place called the Kabbalah Center. I ended up working there. I actually ended up trying different careers. I worked as a door-to-door salesman, which was something that, although very challenging, it was extremely beneficial to learn, right?
Absolutely.
Because it's like, how could you build a relationship in 10 seconds?
And you got to be real comfortable with rejection too. Be like, next. All
Yep.
right. You
Yep.
said no. I'm going to go to this one. But sometimes I feel like that would have been a good thing to try. Although I was always thinking that there was a boogeyman or somebody was going to get me. So I didn't really explore a lot because I don't know. Just when I'd get my nerve up to go and walk on my own, then it's like you read a story about some crazy guy, something on the trail. I'm like, well,
Mhm.
I can just stay back home again,
And you know what I've learned about that is most people are very nice. The people that you may think will not be are the ones that are super nice, right? I remember this one story. I think it was somewhere in West Fort Lauderdale, right? And it's like, redneck town, right? With Confederate flag, no trespassing. And I'm like, I'm going in, and I knock on the door, and the guy says, what do you want? And I'm like, oh, I'm here, blah, 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 blah. And he's like, you want some steak?
Aw,
Just like that.
nice.
Just like
Yeah.
that. We have these preconceived notions about people. And by doing that job in particular, number one, you learn the skills of selling, which is important because it's all relationship building. But again, for me, it was just seeing like people are more alike than they are different if you really look at it. And that job taught me that, right? From there, I worked with I started actually a call center at the Kabbalah Center. I worked with one of the teachers, and I started a call center there. Then I also worked with a good friend of mine, Fred, who's part of our organization right now, and IT and some technology stuff and
That's where
online
you
stuff.
learned
That's
it.
what I learned it from, right? So I'm getting a lot. I got a lot of those skills with the web designs and all the HTML and all that stuff. I learned it from there. I worked in sales again with Comcast, but then finally there was one day, and Jesse kind of like started noticing that I was getting a little bit. I was depressed because yes, I was making great money, Comcast, making in sales.
Were you inside sales, outside sales? Where was your workplace?
I was outside sales in Comcast, and I was making like $80,000 a year, working maybe like 4 or 5 hours a day. So the rest of the time I just spent it reading and all that stuff. But it was very unfulfilling, because it wasn't like the thing that was calling me. So there was always that splintering, like there's something more out there than just maintaining. And I needed that because we had kids. We had to make sure we maintained the house and all that stuff. But then one day she just said, "You're so unhappy." And she called someone that we knew from the past that worked at the Boys and Girls Club. And they say, "Hey, Omar wants to come back." And I went from making $80,000 a year to making $7.45 an hour, part-time.
But you can be outwardly successful by many external measures and inwardly unfulfilled. And then at what
Right.
cost is that? So that's beautiful that she saw you. She
Mhm.
knew you. She
Mhm.
knew what had been good for you. And if you guys met at the Boys and Girls Club, to be able to find a way of like, how can you holistically be you,
Yeah.
your best self, and then be able to build from that.
You've just listened to part 1 of a 2-part episode with Dr. Jessie and Omar, the early chapters. And in part 2, we will pick up with how they met, how the relationship deepened, and what happened when real life applied pressure, career detours, financial stress, and the kind of internal unraveling that forces a rebuild. Thanks for listening to Your Next Success with Dr. Carolyn Sengel. Remember, authentic success is yours to define and includes aligning your career to support the life you want.